So again, Leah kind of brought this up to me. Thought it was a good question. She mentioned her interest and what she likes to learn about and engage in is the relationship side of this business. It's very important. I was actually just talking to Brittany about this yesterday. There are certain agents who are just more inclined, maybe more empathetic people, who are better at engaging in that, having that relationship with people. And that's very valuable. It allows people to like you really quickly. It allows them to trust you more and all that stuff. Sometimes if you're too empathetic or emotionally attached to your client, it can cause problems. It can cause you grief. Obviously we're not doctors, we're not doing surgery or anything, but you have to kind of have that doctor mentality where you have to remove yourself emotionally from the patient or from the client. Your job is to be a level-headed third party to facilitate this transaction and to guide them through the transaction. And if you're as emotional as they are, you're not doing them any good. So very important that you be that level head. Don't get tied up in the emotion. Be able to think critically, take a step back, think outside the box, talk to your mentor through situations. Because when it's just you going through stuff, you can't see all the angles like a mentor or another person can. So be the level-headed third party. It's great to be empathetic. It's great to have great emotional relationships with your clients, be best friends, but don't get caught up in it to where you're not doing a good job for them. So very important. So when we're having, so now we're talking about angry clients, and Mr. Kyle Thacker just walked in. So he's going to help us too. I'm going to put you on camera some.
Oh, no.
So having angry clients, 9 times out of 10, you have an angry client because you didn't set expectations properly at some point. So the first thing you have to do is make sure you set expectations. I used to get so mad at Steve when I was brand new and I was working, and I'd come to my mentor, Steve, with hey, this deal's about to bust or something's wrong, help me out. And he's like, I can't help you. You've already screwed it up. It's gone now. You've missed the opportunity to fix it. And now you can try to piece it together or just try to play a game called Keep the Client. The deal's gone. So just try to keep your client, right? And so if you mess up or don't set expectations properly, it's very tough to backpedal and set them. So it all starts with setting expectations up front, what the inspections are going to be, what the appraiser is going to be, how to write an offer, what happens in multiple offer situations. I've lost a client because we lost a multiple offer situation because I didn't explain what can happen. I explained the risk, and they didn't make a strong enough offer. They lost it, and they ended up not answering my calls anymore. And they bought a house, I assume, with someone else. So setting expectations is the number one thing. When we are delivering news, sometimes what I've learned from the very beginning is it's not people that make a situation hard. It's not a situation that is hard. It is people that make a situation hard. I've had awful situations where I've got good people and we set expectations properly and the other realtor was good and it was smooth. I had a client who had to come 10 grand out of pocket to replace a roof because the insurance didn't cover it. But the people involved were very level-headed and it was fine. And I've had little things explode because the people involved were not very mature or were too emotional or whatever it might have been, and it absolutely exploded. So your ability to manage people and their expectations will determine how good you are at your job. All the other knowledge, how to comp houses, show houses, all that crap, I can teach you that stuff easy. The hard part is how well you manage people and set expectations. And so that's what's going to make situations really ugly or smooth for you. So when we're delivering news, whether it be a bad offer, a good offer, a counter offer, repairs, TRR, when we're delivering news, it's important to set the narrative when we deliver news. Let me go back one. Never, ever text or email stuff to your clients. A text or an email is like a notification. Hey, I'll see you in 10 minutes. That's what a text message is for. A text message is not for, hey, the seller countered us at 250. Do not text your negotiations. Do not text repairs. Do not text anything of material in the contract. And I know it's crazy. It's 2021. Everyone wants to text. Do not. That's the quickest way for stuff to get lost in translation. You cannot text stuff. Pick up the phone and call them. You can hear things in their voice. You can pick up tonality and what they say, and you can hear how they pause, and all these things give you information. When you're negotiating, the more information you have, the more valuable you are, the more you can influence a situation. And if all you have is SMS text messages, you cannot determine. They could say okay, and it could be like an okay, or it could be like a oh, okay, right? And you have no idea what they meant. And you might be angry or sad because they said okay, but really they were pumped up. So make a phone call when you're dealing with stuff in a transaction. Because if you're just texting, and then all of a sudden they call you and they're furious at you, why'd they get so mad? Well, they were mad 20 minutes ago. You just didn't know it. And then it got worse. So don't text, don't email, make phone calls every time. The other realtor, your client, everything. So when you're delivering stuff, whether it be an offer, anything at all, set the narrative. I always try to have a conversation with my client before I send an email. So if I got a counteroffer, I don't send the counteroffer to my client and say, call me when you get this, because they're going to create their own narrative in their head when they read it. I call my client. I say, hey, we got a counteroffer, right? Good news, right? Even if it's a shitty counteroffer. Good news, this, that, blah, blah, blah. I tell them what to think, right? And that's going to allow because they're emotional. They're buying a house. They're selling a house. They're in an emotional state. I tell them what to think so that it prevents a bad narrative in their own head. So I call them, set the narrative. Then I say, all right, I'm going to send it over to you. Let me know if you have any questions. Then I send it to them, and I already told them what to think about it. Right? Because if you send over a TRR with like 50 things on it and you don't call them first, they're gonna be like, what is this? I'm not doing this. But if you call them and say, hey, I know it looks like a lot. We can negotiate it. So don't freak out. Don't overreact. Everything's negotiation. A lot of it's easy. A lot of it we can give them money or what, tell them what to think. But if they just get it, their brain is going to explode. Worst case scenario. That's human beings. So set the narrative before you deliver news or deliver any sort of terms or anything like that, if that makes sense. Ask questions if something is not making sense, or add in anyone as well. So set the narrative. It starts with setting expectations. Be level-headed, right? I talked about this earlier. Don't get emotional with them, right? If they're emotional because they're buying or selling a house, then you're emotional with them. You are going to destroy. Two emotional people are going to destroy this deal. You're not going to be able to have the what's up. You're not going to be able to have the success if everyone is emotional and freaking out. So be level-headed. Know that it's your job to keep everyone on the same level-headed, the playing field, right? Someone explained this to me when I first started. The realtor, like a lock on a door doesn't really keep a thief out. If I want to get in, I just kick the door and I can get in that door. A lock keeps a good person from doing a bad thing, right? It keeps me from walking in and seeing what's in there. Maybe I want to steal it. A realtor is there to kind of do the same thing. People try to get greedy. They try to take shortcuts. If you let them, they're going to do these things. Our job is to say, hey, this is how it should go. This is what it should look like. This is what's normal. Kind of deliver that stuff and guide them through this process. So be that level-headed third party for them. Next is be on their side. When bad things are going to happen, you're going to get bad news. You have to be on their side. They're not always right, but you don't ever want them to be like, whose side are you on? Right? I'm sure if you've had that before. I've had clients who are wrong or being unreasonable. You don't ever say that, but they're being unreasonable, but you still have to be on their side. I get it. Here's what's happening though, right? And what we can try to do is very important. Don't ever villainize the other party. If you have the seller, don't ever villainize the buyer or the buyer's agent, because this is an emotional process. If the other person becomes a bad guy in their head, then it's done. I've emotionally checked out. That guy's he's scum and he's trying to steal money from me, and I'm not going to deal with him anymore.
Everything they do.
Everything. Yep. It's like, hey, the buyer wants to give you an extra 10 grand. Yeah, he'd like that, wouldn't he? No way. So as soon as they villainize the other side, it's done. You have to understand this whole thing is an emotional roller coaster, and your job is to keep it a flat roller coaster, not a real roller coaster. So do not let them villainize the other side or the other realtor, because I've had clients get pissed at the other realtor and they don't want the other realtor involved anymore. And we had something like that. So don't villainize the other side. If you have to villainize someone, villainize the bank or the appraiser or the inspector, someone who's not on the other side of this transaction, right? It appraised 20 grand low. I know that sucks. Appraisers, they're terrible. They're so hard to work with. And banks, this is what, this is why you work with good banks and blah, blah, blah. It's never the other person's fault. Even if the other person's trying to get the 20 grand off, it's never the other person's fault. It's the bank's fault. It's the appraiser's fault. It's the inspector's fault. Don't ever let your client villainize the other side. That's very important, because once they do, all the goodwill's gone and all the negotiations out the window. And then, like Kyle said, every time they do anything or say anything, it's the end of the world.
I don't know if you touched on this, but I think it's super important that as far as like with the other realtor, you always want to develop a good relationship right off the bat, right? I mean, it's like, well, you always want to be on the same page with them. Even if they're being shitty, you want to be the person that's being, you just have to be on the
Great point. And I don't know if you could hear online, but Kyle said, always be on the same team as the other realtor too. Your job is to get the deal done, right? They're guiding their seller and you're guiding the buyer, but we're both have the same goal, is to sell the house. And so a lot of realtors, especially if they're new, think a negotiation is supposed to be like this. Like, in order for me to win, you have to lose. And that's not how negotiating is. You've got to be on the same side. And if you're not, same thing. Most of the time, the realtor has not done a bunch of business, and they're emotional as the clients are. So you have to manage three people. You have to manage the buyer, the seller, and the other realtor sometimes. So negotiations are not like this. We are working together. So don't get right. Everyone has to be on the same side, and you have to juggle, right? You have to say stuff to the realtor that you don't say to the seller, and vice versa. We got to juggle this whole transaction to make sure everything stays on the flat and up and up. So don't villainize the other side. That'll allow your clients, because people want to get mad at someone. They want to point a finger at someone. Don't let it be the other client. Don't let it be the other realtor. Let people sleep on it. If you're delivering bad news, deliver a narrative, tell them what to think, right? And then just say, we don't need to make any decisions tonight. Call me tomorrow. Let's talk through it. And it's a way to get off the phone in a bad conversation, because they're probably heated, but get off the phone and then let them sleep on it. They'll always calm down the next day. 99.9% of the time, they're going to calm down the next day. But let them sleep on it. And I'll kind of end it with this, because I don't really have anything else to talk about if someone else doesn't. But know that, again, this whole process, there is zero logic. That's how much logic is in the real estate transaction. There is zero logic when buying a house. The buyer has no logic. They're buying an emotional decision. The seller has no logic. This is where I raised my kids. This is where my dad owned this house. But whatever, it's all emotion. There is zero logic in this house transaction process. The realtor has to bring the logic to this transaction. So know that people are going to be as stressed out as they've ever been in the last decade or the last 5 years, since whenever the last time they bought a house was. So know they're going to be fired up, and it's your job to manage them, to guide them, and to make sure everything is smooth and good, right? So here's the bad news. You're the messenger. People shoot the messenger sometimes. So you're going to get yelled at. People are going to vent to you. But almost every time, there's been one time that I got yelled at or vented to or whatever, and at the end of the transaction, the person was still mad at me. Almost always they get to closing with, you telling me about that? A client was upset with you, and at closing they apologized. Who was it?
Oh yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
So people get upset. And at closing they're like, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. I know you worked so hard. But they were in it, right? They're in the middle of it. They're in the thick of it, and they're stressed and they're freaking out, and they think they're on their own, and you have to. So if you can set expectations, gain that trust early on, then it's going to make it smoother. But just know you're probably going to get yelled at sometimes. And here's the cool thing. You're going to be fine. You're going to go on down the road. You're going to get another client. They're going to love you. They're probably going to be fine with you afterwards anyways, but just kind of know that it's going to happen. You're not going to be able to avoid, you're never going to have every transaction and everyone loves you. Just forget about it. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to, what is it? You have to crack some eggs to make an omelet. Is that the right? I don't know if that's relative or not, but you're doing tough things. You're making tough decisions. People are people are in bad situations. So stuff's going to happen. So that's kind of all I have on how to handle upset clients. It all kind of starts with your expectation. If they're upset, it's too late. All you can really do at that time is just try to be firm with them. Don't ever let anyone yell at you or belittle you or anything like that. But you just have to be firm with them and say, hey, in a tactful way, it is what it is. We have to move forward at this point now. But by the time they're mad, damage is probably done somehow. You didn't set expectations, you didn't deliver a narrative, whatever it might be. We villainize the other side, whatever it might be. So these are kind of some tips to prevent them from getting mad. Not necessarily how to deal with them when they're mad, but how to prevent them from getting mad. Because at the end of the day, when someone's mad, you're not going to change someone's opinion of you. That by the time they have a good or a bad opinion, it's in there.